Welcome back to Tears for Fears. I'm your host, Megan Shoup. You can find me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. And after pretty much going all in on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers offense last week, I literally had TEARS, Tears for Fears. But I am ready to move on to week 11, go tier by tier, and find our core plays. Before I do, be sure to like this episode, subscribe to the Mayo Media Network, and please check out our sponsors at Run the Sims. Run the Sims is giving us the tools we need to be successful in tiers, and you will be able to see me demonstrate as we go through each tier. So let's get right to it. As we always do, let's take a quick look back before we look ahead. You're looking at the winning lineup in the flea flicker last week, and since Dallas went off, this person got a lot of exposure to Dallas through Prescott and Elliott and didn't force Lamb. Lamb was awesome, though he kind of went out a little early. So Diggs was the highest scoring receiver in tier 4, and so he didn't force that stack, but had the correlation with Dak and Elliott, which was interesting, kind of got all parts of the Dallas touchdowns, which I kind of mentioned for the Buccaneers last week. Didn't work for the Buccaneers, did work for Dallas. Good for this person. They also got a lot of sub 15, 20% owned, including Dak Prescott. So just a really interesting build here, and just always things to keep in mind as we're always trying to improve our tiers lineup builds. So with that, let's jump right into week 11. In Tier 1, we have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. And quite honestly, I see a ceiling game potential for all 4 of these quarterbacks. So I'm going to be rotating them evenly, having about 25% exposure to all of them, just rotating through. But if you're going to make me pick my favorite, I'm going to take the stand that the person did who won last week and they got Dak Prescott 15% owned. I'm going to try to take a little ownership stand here because I can see a ceiling game for all these guys. I think everybody's going to be gravitating to the marquee matchup of Dallas, Kansas City. So I think Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott are going to be very high owned. And then if they're not doing that, I think Lamar Jackson is projecting as the highest ceiling. So for that reason, I think Josh Allen is going to come in as the lowest owned quarterback in this tier. And he could easily have as high a ceiling as any of these other guys. In fact, he's playing in a game with a great matchup, has very high pass rate over expectation. So, he could easily get there too. So for that reason, Josh Allen is my tier 1 play. In Tier 2, we have Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, and Dalvin Cook. And again, I like all these guys and going to rotate my exposure. I'll probably have the least exposure to Jonathan Taylor, which is frightening since he's been a fantasy stud. But between Hill, McCaffrey, Adams, and Cook, I will be rotating exposure through all of them. But I do have a favorite play here, and I will have the most exposure to Christian McCaffrey. If you go over to Run the Sims and the rangefinder tool, McCaffrey has a much higher win rate than all the other players in this tier. And, listen, this is a guy on a PPR site who's going to get a lot of receptions, still has touchdown upside even with Cam playing, and he has a potential to double bonus. So he just has easier outs to get to his ceiling. So for that reason, Christian McCaffrey is my tier 2 play. In Tier 3, we have Deebo Samuel, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Justin Jefferson, and Stephon Diggs. And as you can see, we have to pay attention to practice reports and injury reports leading up to Sunday. As of Wednesday, Nick Chubb was still on the COVID list, and Deebo Samuel is questionable, but he did get in a limited practice, so that's trending in the right direction. So I do like Samuel, Elliott, Jefferson, and Diggs this weekend, but I really like Samuel and Diggs for their ceiling and matchups. So what am I going to do to decide between the two? I'm going to head over to Run the Sims and their rangefinder tool. And as you can see, I put it in, and Deebo Samuel has the higher win rate. Again, I do love Diggs' matchup. Wide receiver ones have been going off on the Colts, so I'm going to have a lot of exposure to both, quite honestly. But since Samuel has the higher win rate, we'll go with Deebo Samuel as our Tier 3 play. In Tier 4, we have Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Joe Mixon, Travis Kelce, A.J. Brown, and A.J. Dillon. And while I don't know that this has happened much this season with this many players in a tier, but I can't see any player that I'd want to fade. I see a ceiling potential for literally all these players and kind of love all their spots. I do have 2 favorites, though. I'm going to probably have exposure to all these guys, but my 2 favorites are Lamb and A.J. Brown. Lamb in that potential shootout against Kansas City, and A.J. Brown in a very, obviously, juicy matchup against the Texans. So I'm going to go over to Run the Sims, the rangefinder tool. A.J. Brown is popping with a much higher win rate. So even though I do love Lamb, and we'll play him a lot. I love A.J. Brown in this spot too, and A.J. Brown is our Tier 4 play. And in Tier 5, we're back to quarterbacks again with Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Ryan Tannehill. And kind of opposite of Tier 4, in Tier 5, I only like a couple of these guys. And, obviously with Russell Wilson, he's coming back from that finger injury, didn't look right last week. I need to see it a little bit more before I trust it. Jalen Hurts is in a very low passing volume offense, so he's kind of going to have to get there with his legs. And Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers are potentially going to be playing in a slow pace slogfest, very run heavy. So I kind of like the running backs in those games way more than I do the passing side. So I really just love Joe Burrow and Ryan Tannehill. So, I'm going to have exposure, maybe sprinkle some of those other guys, but I'm going to have most of my exposure to those two guys. But I have to like Burrow coming back off the bye. That was a rough outing the game before against the Browns. So I really think he could have a bounce back spot. And we saw what Kansas City did to the Raiders defense. I could see Burrow putting up some ceiling numbers here. So Joe Burrow is my Tier 5 play. In Tier 6, we have Marquise Brown, DeAndre Swift, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, and George Kittle. And right off the bat, I'm fading Metcalf and Cooper. Cooper's just so volatile, so boom bust. Again, I like Lamb a lot better in that game. It's just hard to trust even in Tier 6 because he's only shown ceiling potential twice this season. Metcalf, again, it's hard to trust with Russ coming off the injury situation. So I really like the other four. McLaurin's the play if you want low ownership. Nobody's playing McLaurin in tiers. I track the ownership each week. No matter what tier he's in, nobody's playing McLaurin. You're going to get him sub 10%. So I like him for an ownership play. But obviously, I also like Brown, Swift, and Kittle. But my favorite play has got to be Marquise Brown. I think he's got a great matchup against the Bears, and I think he absolutely could be the highest scoring by far in this tier. So for that reason, Marquise Brown is my Tier 6 play. In Tier 7, we have Adam Thielen, Michael Pittman Jr., James Robinson, Brandon Cooks, DJ Moore, James Conner, Eli Mitchell, and Devonta Smith. Again, pay attention to injury reports leading up to Sunday with a couple Q tags. But this tier is full of players that you could make a case for, but you're just not super confident, like a DJ Moore. Could he be better with Cam Newton? Maybe. Maybe not. Then there's a lot of tough matchups for someone like a Michael Pittman Jr. So that leaves me with just two guys that I really love. Like I may sprinkle some of those other guys in, but two guys I love is James Conner and Brandon Cooks. With Conner, I'd like to see Kyler Murray playing to feel more confident about him. But for Brandon Cooks, his target share is undeniable. And I think obviously they're going to be playing in a game script where they're going to have to be throwing a lot. So I really think he's got huge ceiling potential here to hit that 100-yard bonus, potentially have touchdown equity, get some long passes. So for that reason, Brandon Cooks is my Tier 7 play. And in Tier 8, we have Mark Andrews, Tyler Lockett, Corey Davis, Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, Michael Carter, Antonio Gibson, and Mark Ingram. And right away, I can rule out or fade a few guys. Mark Ingram with Kamara back. Michael Carter now has kind of become back to like a three-man backfield. Josh Jacobs, Raiders are just not running the ball well. Corey Davis with Joe Flacco, I can't trust it. So that leaves me with four guys, Andrew, Lockett, Waller, and Gibson. With Lockett, don't love it, but Tier 8 is pretty low for him, so he might take some shots. Gibson, he doesn't get the pass down work or many targets, but he is getting a bunch of green zone touches, so that keeps him in play for me. So it's really the tight ends that I'm most interested in, Andrews and Waller. And although Waller has had a very disappointing season really so far, he is still getting the targets. And Raiders are throwing at a high pass rate, and Bengals are a good matchup against tight ends. So for that reason, Darren Waller is my Tier 8 play. That'll do it for this week's Tiers for Fears. What do you guys think I did? Please let me know in the comments section and let me know your core plays and fades. And I know looking at this lineup, it's pretty frightening that I don't have any Dallas or Kansas City players. And believe me, I will do some lineups where I have game stacks or access to that game. But I think this lineup is unique because it's really getting a lot of high ceiling guys at then potentially lower ownership. And I still got some 4 p.m. hammers with Joe Burrow and Waller. So with that, I need you guys to like this episode, subscribe to the Mayo Media Network, check out Run the Sims. As you see, they helped me make a lot of tiers decisions and hope they will for you guys too. So now let's go make some money and I'll meet you back here next week.